So let's do something unique with this thing. So right now, this guy is walking at a certain pace. Um, what if you wanted to have him walk slow and then fast and then faster and faster and faster for a certain amount of frames? Well, so let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this thing back so that it only loops one time. So let's go back to the interpret footage panel and make sure you select that and interpret footage panel and make that loop only one time. Okay, so now it's back to its 10 frames. And let's duplicate this a couple times. So Command D, Command D. So now let's sequence them together end to end. Select these things, right click and choose keyframe assistance, sequence. And we don't want any overlap. So no overlap and hit OK. So now they're just going to be like this. So if you hit play, the first one is 10 frames per second. The next one is 10 frames per second. The next one is 10 frames per second. So what if you wanted to do them to be different? Well, if you change the 10 frames per second here, then it's going to change all of these, right? So what if you want this 10 frames and then this one 5 frames and then one frame per second? So let's cancel that. We're going to cancel this. So the way you do that is instead of changing it in interpret footage, you actually go to you stretch it out. You stretch it out. So I'm going to right click next to source name here, right click and choose columns, columns and stretch. So now I have a stretch value here. And then I'm going to press F2, so I deselect all my layers. Now I'm going to select this layer here, and I'm going to stretch it. So I'm going to leave that one alone. The second one, I'm going to stretch it by 200%. So 200%. So now it's twice as long, which means it's going to be slower. And then this one here, I'm going to stretch it to 300%. Okay, so now let's resequence these. So select them, right click, keyframe assistance, sequence, layers, and no overlap. So there you go. So now let's watch this. 10 frames, and then he's slower, and then even slower still. The point being that if you want the same sequence to have different frame rates and you're going to use it multiple times, use the stretch value, stretch parameter here, so that you can have different frame rates without having to go here and because if you change the interpret footage frame rate, that changes all of them. Okay. All right. So let's trim our comp. So we're gonna select the bottom one here. How do you go to the end? It's O. How do you trim the comp? The letter N, and right click and trim comp to work area.